Hello and welcome to the Establishing Shots podcast, a podcast about the art, craft and, let's face it, business of filmmaking. I'm Nick Hilton. My guest on this episode is the American writer, director and actor Jay Alvarez. Jay's film Dizzy Pursuit, his sophomore feature, is playing currently at the Raindance Film Festival in London, and he joined me to have a discussion about how that film came to be, and particularly how it came to be executive produced by the Russo Brothers. Now, in the days following our interview, I've started to feel very guilty about how I spoke about the Russo Brothers in the episode. So I'd like to take this opportunity to say I think what the Russo Brothers did for Jay is really cool, and I shouldn't have let my ambivalence, let's say, about the Avengers franchise cloud that. Anyway, here's our conversation. So I'm here in the Hospital Club in London, central London, with Jay Alvarez, Jay Alvarez, I should say. We've been discussing how to pronounce his surname. The director, writer, lead actor. Do you also have a producer credit?
I don't think I do with this one, in deference to the producer.
Okay, so that's just a writer, director, and lead actor of Dizzy Pursuit, which is currently screening at the Raindance Film Festival. Have you had your screening yet?
No, the first screening takes place on the 3rd.
But you're in London for the whole festival. You're going to see lots of stuff here, or are you just going to go see your movie and then do the tourist stuff?
I don't know how much touristic activities I'll take. I think that currently my accommodations are pretty grim, so I'm mostly compelled by this Eastern European slumlord who's hosting me in a rented room.
Is this an Airbnb?
It's an Airbnb.
This is very true to your movie.
Thank you.
Perhaps the sequel.
The material's infecting everything. I didn't pay for it, but my cinematographer is financing this, and there's been a couple of really alarming fights that have taken place between this kind of hussy slumlord host and her husband, and there was a couple problems that I was involved in. For instance, I'm cripplingly unmechanical in my home country, but when I come here, it's intensified, especially with the loss of sleep and the inability to acclimate myself to shower knobs. So I was having a lot of trouble turning off the shower, and I had to knock on her door, and everything's very cramped, at least to an American sensibility. Everything's very cramped. So I'm knocking on her door, and she comes out. I'm basically half naked, and I need her to turn the shower off for me. And I imagine that especially where she comes from, she assumes any male's reasonably mechanical and can do this himself. So it seems very fraudulent to her, but she consents.
Turning the shower off is quite a...
It's a fundamental ability that I'm not capable of in England.
You have baths exclusively in the US.
Well, often,
it's
but
not a very green thing to do in Los Angeles, having all these baths.
Right. I don't have baths. I've never been able to take baths. So she comes and turns the shower off for me, and then I realize while the shower's been turned off, I'm unable to turn off the faucet, which I'd incorrectly turned on trying to take a shower. So I have to knock on her door again, and I'm smiling. I'm tactful, but it's all, I think, interpreted a little differently than I meant it. The next day, she is wearing the highest, tightest dress I've ever seen. Now, I don't know if there's a correlation.
This doesn't sound like such a tragedy. I mean, it's not such a awful. So where is your accommodation? The final question on the accommodation, because I don't know how interested.
Does everything I have to say be a tragedy?
No, you just described it as
I'm trying to uplift you.
Okay, I'm uplifted by this romance you've struck up with your Eastern European landlord. Where are you staying?
We're staying in Kennington.
Kennington is very near where I live.
I know. Well,
it's a nice part of town, Kennington.
Is it? You live in Brixton, which I was told was less safe and more interesting by someone on the tube. She said that Kennington has grown boring and safe now.
I mean, these are all parts of central London, so this is
What do you mean?
Brixton and Kennington are probably more like Brooklyn in New York, whereas but it's all kind of Manhattan, Brooklyn. These are all nice areas.
I like that. So every time I talk to someone, something that had once been considered exciting or dangerous is sort of described as being innocuous. So you are the highest point of dismissing all danger from anything included in central London. And I'm wondering if it's just like an inherent toughness of yours.
Me personally?
Yeah, like you don't sense threat in general.
Well, where we are now is one of the least threatening places in the world.
Well, yeah, of course. We're essentially in Manhattan right now. But if you venture south, is it impossible to get mugged? I know you guys don't have guns, but can't there be?
I've never been mugged.
And you walk freely. You walk at night.
I walk freely. Yeah, I walk at night. Let's talk very, very briefly. This all sort of leads, in a way. We've done 8 minutes on how dangerous London is. Into your movie, which is Dizzy Pursuit, which is about, well, you can say, but it's sort of about people living in not the right area of town in pursuit of this dizzy
Right,
dream.
depending on what you're looking for, not the right area.
Yes, yeah. Is it the right area for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's the imperative area for one of their priorities and not the other person. They've defaulted into the only area.
And this is, forgive me if I'm doing the most basic thing you are not supposed to do in critical studies, but I presume it's autobiographical. Is it, in some senses?
I like that as easing into the, yeah, that's good. I think that most significant art is essentially autobiographical in the most important ways. And then even when things grow really abstract, they usually, oftentimes that question sounds to me like asking someone, some forum creator, if they know intimately the subjects about which they write. And if they don't, if the answer is no, I don't know how compelled I am after that point.
But the film is, I mean, look, everything is subtextually autobiographical to some extent. The film is about two filmmakers in a city, but trying to make their film, auditioning actors whilst family members come and visit them, disrupt their schedule. They're making what I presume is a very low-budget movie.
Yes.
And I don't know what the budget for Dizzy Pursuit was. Is this a publicly available... Can you ballpark?
Yes, I think it is publicly. There's some. The metric is what we gained through the crowdfunding campaign,
right?
Which I think was around $25,000.
Right, and that was it. There was, or you supplemented with private investment, or you had people working, contributing skills and.
There tends to always be an undocumented supplementation that's endless, never ending. It's still being, you know what I mean. You could categorize our travels here as being part of this undocumented budget that's required at all times to just continue the movie in some form.
So about $25,000 was your cash budget, let's call it.
Sure.
The money you had to play with. Is that the sort of how you visualize the film they're making in Dizzy Pursuit? Or were they making Dizzy Pursuit? I mean, the dialogue that they were reading in the auditions didn't sound a million miles from the style of the dialogue. They're certainly making a film similar tonally to Dizzy Pursuit.
Yeah, people have asked about the resemblance of the movie that they're making to Dizzy Pursuit. And it was something that I would have to answer to when actors would ask me questions. And I would find myself learning more about the movie they were most likely making, just in sort of meeting the demands of the actors to substantiate their roles. I don't think that their material was probably as metafictional, and I don't think it presented the same level of metafictional ironies, but I think the budget was probably somewhat similar. I think that they seem to not have a solution to shielding their prospective actors from the reality of their home life, and so that seems to be the largest difference between my current practices and theirs.
So that wasn't your actual apartment?
It was my producer's apartment.
Okay. A little bit more distance than Adam and
right.
Was the girlfriend is
Carly.
Carly. I was going to say Katie. Not a million miles off, but given I watched it this morning, would you call this a mumblecore movie?
Mumblecore movies, from my understanding, and I think that I'm not at all. I don't find the term pejorative.
Your press release involves the word mumblecore. Your listing on the Raindance website also involves the word mumblecore. Not to put you on the spot, but
absolutely. I appreciate that. I didn't know this.
I think the Raindance Festival calls you the heir to the mumblecore crowns of Joe Swanberg, etc., etc.
Whoa. Yeah, I from my understanding, those movies are improvised, which is a really good way to ensure popularity at mainstream film festivals that detest writers. Mm-hmm. There's a great derision for the writer in film culture. And that's not the case here.
Tightly scripted, this was.
It's very tightly scripted.
But there's a sense of tone, and maybe that sort of these films that came out of the low-budget movement in the early age of digital cinema.
In a way, I feel like I've been thoroughly engaged for the first time now. I'm really interested in this because those characters I've found in mumblecore movies, they have an ineffectual femininity regardless of their gender, and that's yielding interesting conflicts. But I don't really see that as characterizing the characters in Disney Pursuit. There's a sort of languid, tentative dynamic between the characters that in most mumblecore movies, where they have a nascent sexuality that they're struggling with. I don't think that resembles my content. I think, and with fondness to say what I consider the high points of mumblecore content: two characters of opposite gender on a bed, not quite sure what to do. I don't relate to that as much.
But clearly people use mumblecore quite loosely to mean this sort of things that represent this sort of listless millennial sort of, and things like
Sure, okay.
The films that Greta Gerwig went on to make after she'd actually done mumblecore, which were probably tightly scripted, things like Mistress America, Lola Versus, these things, which have a sense of feeling, which is
I don't know if I would equate the direction, the psychological direction of the characters in Disney Pursuit to an aimlessness, to an ennui. I think that there is.
They're actually very driven.
I think that's the source of the fundamental conflict is their drive and in which direction it's headed.
So do you think mumblecore might actually be a kind of a lazy slogan for things that are shot digitally, low budget, and also, I guess, have a texture to them which is kind of low budget, lo-fi, let's say?
Absolutely. I think it's a good journalistic or an easy journalistic crutch. I also want to say that I don't condescend to movies that are considered mumblecore. I've gotten a lot of pleasures out of what I consider to be the best entries into that genre, but I don't at all relate to improvised content in terms of filmmaking. It's not a part of the process, and I don't see many similarities between the perennial content or conflicts of those characters and my own.
So in your elevator pitch for Disney Pursuit, if you have to be like, this is, Die Hard meets, God, I can't think of another movie, Yellow Submarine, what are the kind of the precedents for this? What are you thinking of if you're not thinking of mumblecore?
I know that combining two pre-existing movies is a very common pitch tool.
You don't have
right. I understand. I think that ideally one's creating something that doesn't at all lend itself to that comparison, that causes one to greatly struggle to find like movies.
So can we talk about how you made the film? Which is that
And this is the craft part.
This is the
right?
This is the craft part.
We're transitioning to craft. Yeah.
So you've got what camera do you shoot on? This is just the boring staccato questions.
Right. I mean, I think it's probably really engrossing to technicians.
Yeah.
Which I'm not, but I can speak in superficial terms about the instruments.
Yep.
It was an Arri Alexa.
Okay.
That was the camera we shot on.
And it was you got your cinematographer in, and because you said he has helped you with this trip over to London.
Yes.
Is he British?
He's not. One would only be motivated to finance a British trip if one is British.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you're less motivated. I don't know. I just thought perhaps he would be.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like he's financially. I'm at an Airbnb which he doesn't host, but lives in Britain.
He obviously has some incentive to bring you to Britain.
Right.
Maybe he's brought you here to kill you, or maybe he's just brought you here to exhibit the film, which is the most plausible answer.
I think he's struggling a little less currently, at least monetarily.
Okay, and hence him owning an Arri Alexa.
He doesn't own one.
Okay.
The owner of the Arri Alexa is in fact with us as well.
Okay, so
he's staying with a woman in Brixton, actually.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah.
How big was the crew? You're shooting in a real apartment, not a studio apartment.
Right. The crew was small. There was essentially it was composed of department heads and nothing else.
Yeah. And in terms of your process from writing to having a finished product, how long were you at this for? How long was the writing process for you?
I think that I was very much aware of exactly how long the writing process was for my previous movie, but subsequently my life has entered enough sleep-deprived haze that I no longer can trace without referring to the documents in a computer exactly how long it took me to write them. I think that even then I would know when they were created, but I wouldn't know when they were completed. The scripts are piling up now.
Right.
The children. It's no longer the first.
This is the classic question. Maybe people don't ask it, but how do you do your filmmaking? Did you pay yourself out of the $25,000 you've crowdfunded, or do you do a completely different job, or do you do work in the film industry and then make your own films on the side? How do you get these films done and also presumably have some sort of shelter and food to eat?
I don't pay myself at all. I don't get a cent for either film I made. How do I support myself? I usually succumb to miserable, spat upon menial labor jobs. Those are what financed my ability to live during the project's creation.
What's a menial labor job?
I work for the public. I suffer for the public.
I don't know what this euphemism is. What suffering from? Are you a lifeguard? Are you a
no? Well, lifeguards usually have a pretty cush position, suntanning and observing.
Well, maybe this is something to think about. Los Angeles is near the sea, I presume.
That's true, but I don't go there. I'm not a beach person, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I've had a lot of restaurant work.
Okay.
And I've been able to turn over a lot of musical instruments on Craigslist.
Okay, so you flip guitars and well, I won't say flip burgers, even though that would make sense.
Right. I've never been in the kitchen. I don't want it to come across like I'm one of those animals.
No.
This is purely front of house.
Yeah, exactly. Okay? You're presentable enough to be out front. So that's how you do how you finance the writing process, right? So that's the writing process takes however long it takes. This mysterious amount of time that's in your head.
The first film was exactly 2.5 months
for writing.
For writing. This one I don't know. I think it most likely was a smaller amount of time than that.
And then you've got the script. You went into your crowdfunding. You went straight into crowdfunding, or did you developed it with your actors? You did pre-production.
There isn't a workshop type environment. I'm afraid it's more of an oppressive, overbearing guidance toward verbatim recitation.
Do you know the actors before? Are they people you're in a sort of social with, or are they just hired hands?
There were some new actors, and then the actors that I'd liked most from the previous project I brought onto this one, the ones who forgave me.
Okay. When did you film this?
I think in the autumn of 2016.
Okay, so a while ago.
It has been a while.
How long was the shoot?
It was about a month.
A month. It's quite a long shoot for a film which is essentially a single location. For with only $25,000 to spend, doesn't leave you much per day.
Yeah, I think that if we're going to distinguish the project on a craft level from the majority of movies with similar budgets, it would be how much longer the shoots are, how many more takes are recorded, and how much longer the editing process is. And it requires the support, enthusiasm, and loyalty of the principal collaborators, which I'm very lucky to say existed in both cases.
So how long then was the edit process? It's been, 2 years?
Well,
or were you finished a year ago? And you've
well, it's not. The film's not finished. It's a working cut that we're using for this screening, but it's not finished. There's more editing to be done. Do
you have a planned finish date, or is it sort of this constant evolution, or do you need to finish it by a certain point? Do you need to wash your hands of it?
I would love to wash my hands of every project. Unfortunately, the financial limitation results in it being this grueling, ongoing process that continues indefinitely into the future.
Is this its first public showing in Raindance?
Yes.
And then have you got other festivals lined up, maybe back home, or are you just seeing how it is?
Most likely, the last film's first screening was also at Raindance, and afterward, a lot of festivals.
Were you here for this?
I was, yeah. It was my first festival. There's nostalgia involved.
Right. So you're a Raindance,
alum.
Old hand.
Yeah.
Just to talk about the elephant in the room. Jesus. Which is the subject line of the PR email that I got about your film, which is new film executive produced by the Russo Brothers, which everyone's going to be asking you about.
Absolutely, it took a very long time for you, though. How self-conscious is this delay?
Well, I'm not wildly interested in the output of the Russo Brothers personally. I think they seem like great guys. I thought that Avengers thing was tremendously boring, but it's a great coup for you, and it's a great coup for you because it allows your PR to send out a subject line, exec produced by the Russo Brothers. How did this happen? Also, special thanks to Robert Downey Jr. You're sort of leaning into it there in the credits.
Of course. Our first film screened at Slamdance Film Festival after Raindance. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am, yeah.
Okay. And they were at the screening, loved the movie, and have been incredibly helpful supporters afterward. So they too had their debut feature screen at Slamdance, and in the audience for them in I think 1996 was Soderbergh, who was really into their debut and supported them and produced their second feature.
And so it was just a case of they came to your screening, and then you went for a drink afterwards, or even that?
I was called on the phone.
Oh,
I was called on the phone in dreary, cold Portland, Oregon.
Is that where Slamdance is? You're in a motel. I just want to set
Slamdance is in Park City. It coincides Sundance.
Okay. Right.
Same time, same place.
Right.
Slightly different venue.
And a different vibe, I would imagine.
Yes, a lot of it is self-perpetuated, the difference. I think there's a certain amount of pride in the difference, and I don't think it's altogether unfounded. There's a Slamdance in certain ways resembles what Sundance allegedly used to be, and they're proud of that. It's not they're less movie stars. There's a certain integrity sensed from that absence.
Let's go back to the Russo Brothers. Sorry, I'm not quite done with them.
Sure.
So you got a phone call. You're in a dingy motel in Portland, Oregon. And they said, we liked your previous feature. What are you working on?
Yes.
And then you already had the script ready for Dizzy Pursuit, or you were just kept them on the line with the occasional email sext for the next few years.
Wow. At the time Dizzy Pursuit hadn't been written, I had a couple of other scripts that I was working on. Dizzy Pursuit was made, and it was the one that could be created immediately because of its relatively small financial demand. I have a couple of projects in development that were further along at the point of that conversation that I'm currently trying to get financing for.
And which they're also involved in? I imagine
Yes.
It's a tremendous boon if you're trying to get financing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. They've been an enormous blessing. It felt like for many months following their initial introduction to my life and expressed support, it felt like a great dream I hadn't woken up from. Usually it's a nightmarish feeling you think you can't escape, but this was a great dream.
And Robert Downey Jr., it's like the sort of second credit. So you're begging me to ask the question about Robert Downey Jr. I feel you're begging other people to ask it. You thank him. Special thanks.
He was a big part of the movie getting funded because there was a pay structure that the Russo brothers assisted where by donating money to our film's crowdfunding campaign, a donor could receive a set visit to the Avengers films.
Oh, wow.
And so
I shouldn't have slagged off the Avengers films.
That's right.
3 minutes ago.
So fanatical comic book film fans from around the world would throw money at our crowdfunding campaign in hopes of seeing their favorite movie stars in the flesh. And they did, and it all worked out tremendously. And they were surprisingly women. I would have thought that they would have been pasty, overweight men in fetid basements. They were slender, chic women from around the world who really wanted to see those male movie stars.
Clearly, they're the people with the money. Maybe it's the pastier the men, the less money they have.
Really? I've never found that correlation.
I saw this video of a man who went to see the latest Avengers movie, which I have just criticised. I think 70 times at the cinema or something like that. And all I kept thinking was, how on earth is he affording it?
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that.
It costs like 14 quid to go to see the cinema. I'm not a mathematician.
So, but ballpark, what would that be? Yeah, what would that be? Approximately.
I can't ballpark it. This is sort of an embarrassing indictment.
That's
of,
okay.
British math education. 17 times. Well, let's 10 times. So 700 plus about £1,000. £1,000 to go see this movie.
So in American dollars, what? So that's not. People are well off.
Maybe
Are we that distant?
He was also saying that he was getting a soda at the cinema and some red vines or whatever. And
you may need to review this because if you think about
either way, just to go see one movie, so it must have been an almost impressive undertaking to go see this movie sometimes anyway.
But I think
let alone financial undertaking.
I think at that point, at that extreme degree, even for a mega fan, part of his motivation is the notoriety he'd earned by documenting his feat.
Yeah.
He had a publicity campaign.
Yeah, for what? To
in,
what
in
end,
box
though?
office. To what end?
Maybe he also has a movie.
Well, I mean, this is his creation. His art is having gone to the film so many times.
So your upcoming projects, you say you've got a couple more things in development.
Yes.
More financially ambitious, if not creatively ambitious?
More financially demanding, certainly. A lot of locations. My future work that I'm most passionate about getting made is similarly structurally and financially demanding because of the amount of characters and locations.
Are you someone who wants to be I'll think about how I word this, but a low-budget filmmaker going forward? Or are you someone who wants as much money, as big a stars as possible to play with?
I would want as most resources as possible. I mean, hypothetically, if the budget was large enough to an abstract, absurd degree, you would have enough resources to not even depend upon marketable movie stars for their incentive. You could hypothetically support the distribution without them. So yes, I would want as many resources as possible. There isn't a pride in my marginal nature.
But even the way you phrased that just there, you immediately saw the idea of unlimited wealth as a way of subverting and undercutting the need or the necessity for big stars to market your movie. Are you someone who, you said you're not marginal by nature, but that is kind of
I am marginal by nature, but not
stance.
by choice.
But not by choice. Are you looking to cast your next movie with people to sell it to distribute? I don't know what the distribution plan is for Dizzy Pursuit. Whether I know in the US Netflix is a wee bit more open than it is in the UK, and the same with
Interesting.
In UK Netflix, it's very hard for indie movies to get onto it. Whereas I know indie filmmakers in the US have a lot more success getting it onto Amazon and Netflix.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I've never really thought about or heard about the differences between streaming platforms between the two countries.
Well, the Netflix library in the US is many, many times the size of the UK. It's just
What's the country of its origin?
America. It's got more people in it.
That's true.
More filmmakers.
That's true. It's a bigger country. I was ridiculed when I went through customs by a person who asked me if I had ever been to another country. And when I said I had, he congratulated me and said, usually with Americans, that's not the case. At the very most, maybe they had been to the Mexican border. I was a little offended considering how big America is, and the fact that if our country was as microscopic as the surrounding European nations, I would have been to plenty of countries. It's just like it's like going to Texas for me. It's like to be bilingual is not as impressive over here. I think that needs to be
in
said.
England.
In Europe.
In England, it's tremendously impressive to be bilingual. I mean, English people do not learn other languages. In the US, I think you have much more bilingualism because you have, people learn Spanish to a really good degree. In England, we are completely indecisive about which language we want to learn to even the most basic level.
Because it's too international.
You have something you're going back to America to do, or are you just still now focusing on finishing Dizzy Pursuit?
I'm focusing on Dizzy Pursuit, but there's coinciding. The completion of Dizzy Pursuit is definitely the first phases of the next production.
So Dizzy Pursuit is on 3rd of October.
And the 4th.
And the 4th of October at the Raindance. Which cinema is it in? I don't know. There's only a few. This will be somewhere Haymarket. You can check it out on the Raindance website if that time hasn't passed.
Is View a venue?
Yeah.
It's at View Piccadilly. Is that a venue?
Yeah.
It's at View Piccadilly,
Yeah.
I believe.
That may be where all of Raindance
I think
is.
so. It has a great centralized feeling.
It does. It's a nice-ish cinema.
It's a very, to my sensibilities, posh commercial cinema for a radical festival.
Yeah, and do you feel like Raindance is a radical festival?
I think comparatively, especially from what I gather, film festival culture in Europe is very commercial. And so, whereas film festivals in America can be grassroots and obscure, here I've been told that it's much more commercial in general. Is that true?
I mean, are you making a distinction between Europe and the UK, or is UK part of Europe for the essence of this question?
It is admittedly
a very terrible film festival culture in this country.
Okay.
And I think Raindance is an interesting one because it's called Raindance because of Sundance. I mean, it's a knockoff. But we've sort of we got LFF coming up here, which is probably the biggest British film festival. But it is just replaying films that have already played at Venice and Toronto, and that's the mainstream festival. And then it's just. We're sort of always the bridesmaid in terms of festivals compared to European festivals. I mean, you go to Berlin. And it's not just not just the Berlin Film Festival, but you've got a much much stronger art house culture. I mean, the Raindance, and I don't know how it was for your first film. Some of the audiences in these films are, the cinemas are not full.
No, yeah. I mean, this is a very candid, discriminating interview compared to the ones that I've engaged in the past. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I will cut most of this out.
No, that's okay. So it's very it is refreshing. There's a certain level of cynical honesty that doesn't resemble what I've experienced previously. But yes, the screening wasn't packed. The audience members. There was one charming young woman who had gotten off work early specifically to see my first feature. I appreciated that. In general, I don't know. Have you found that film festival goers in the UK resemble the stodgy commercial theater that plagues downtown?
Film festival goers in the UK resemble the cast and crew of the films being presented.
Okay. It's an incestuous microcosmic.
Well, it's just film festivals make all their money in submissions, and then there's no particular incentive on them to sell tickets because they can't, because most of the films that are playing
don't have stars.
Don't have stars. No one really wants to go and see a bunch of shorts that are featuring people they've never heard of.
Right.
So the people who are there tend to be cast and crew, and and that's great in a sense. But when you spend $30 to submit to a festival, and that's a reasonable fee compared to a lot of places. I don't know how much Raindance is.
I like you having the indignation of someone else's position. You're not even a film festival submitter.
In this role here, I'm sort of trying to vocalize some of the frustrations of people who indie filmmakers.
Okay, yeah.
And I just think trying to make things more transparent, trying to stop people from wasting their money.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have an incentive to. I don't really know too much about, but my limited experience with film festivals and the way they're run does inspire me to think that the curation process is often, and this is to generalize, it's certainly there are festivals that this doesn't speak to, it is very dubious. It's very dubious.
Did you guys submit to Raindance, or were you kind of poached this year?
Well, we submitted, but it was a little different in that we'd screened previously, and the really admirable, very exceptional lead programmer of Raindance was a big supporter of the first film. Mm-hmm. And so I think that probably alters future interactions with. Okay,
well, I've said all the terrible things I'll need to cut out.
Yeah.
I did a ticket thing about 10 minutes ago, but tickets may still be available depending on when this goes out, and if not, Dizzy Pursuit will be available in some form at some point, or will it just be one of those sort of lost films like the Orson Welles one, which is just about to come out?
What's the Orson Welles one?
I don't know. He screened at Toronto maybe, or Venice, and for the first time, and there's now talk that he might be nominated for the Best Director Oscar this year.
Really? Really? There's a posthumous lost film that's been.
Yeah. And supposed to be, it was getting very good notice. Unsurprisingly, it was getting very good notices.
Right.
I'm going to try and wrap it up again. Dizzy Pursuit at the Raindance Film Festival, and then we never quite got around to whether people are going to be able to see it. The average British listener, do you think should they just wait for the superhero movie that you're making?
Jesus, the cynicism from you. It'll be available online. We'll make sure of it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and do remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're really wherever sensible people get their shows. And do check out podopods.com, that's Podot pods.com, for information about the range of shows that we produce. And for sales and advertising, email nick@podopods.com. See you soon.